My name is Avital Grushcovski from Source Defense, and I'm very happy to be here and talk about third-party scripts and their connection and challenges they bring to the GDPR. Now, if you've checked our profile prior to this, then you know Source Defense handles third-party script management. And I'm not here to talk about Source Defense or our products. I do, however, want to tell you how I got to be in Source Defense and why I think that I'm able to talk about this problem. I've spent most of my occupational life handling third-party JavaScript. I've done this as a technology provider in at least 2 major ad companies, and I've done this on the consumer side, being the pinpoint between marketing, security, and R&D in a major publisher. I've led all integration of third-party script on the website. This happened at least once a month. Suffice to say, I've seen my share of crashes, hacks, data leaks, all coming from third-party vendors. Now, one night, I was usually stuck at traffic on my way to home, and a good friend of mine called up, and he was really stressing about a project he was working on. He was working in a major third-party vendor and got a very big project from one of the biggest banks in the US to provide assistance for users who are visually impaired. So he created an add-on to their solution that allowed the user to hear where he is on the website when he clicked the arrow keys. In essence, he created a keylogger inside a bank. Now, he was waiting for the security team of his own company to come and yell at him. That didn't happen. And so he expected the bank to do this, and that didn't happen. And didn't happen because, well, no one knew it was there. This is when we realize just how dangerous third-party scripts can be. Now, before I start the slides of the presentation, I want to show you a short example. Just to stress just how much access third-party script can have to the page, I prepared a demonstration. This is our bank, the professional financial advisor. Now, what we did here is simple. I've added on my own computer one more third-party JavaScript to the page. With that JavaScript, I've accessed personal information and also requested additional information the site doesn't usually ask for. Now let's try to log in. We can see, once I enter my username and password and log in, that I'm prompted for additional information. Some sort of authentication error occurred, and the bank wants more information. Now I'm on my bank website. I've got here for my favorites, and this is all information my bank has on me. So I see no problem providing this information. Trying to log in, I can see that the JavaScript had access to each and every piece of information I provided, both the one from the form he created and the ones on the website. This is a very simple thing to do in JavaScript. We all know this. This is just hijacking the click event on the login button and replacing it with my own action, or just simply accessing information on web forms on the page, like the username and password field. So, a short agenda. What do we want to cover here today? We want to see which third-party scripts we're talking about and why do we use them. Understand why they pose a problem to us and how exactly it's related to the GDPR. What kind of tools are available today to tackle this problem, and if and how can we make these tools better? So, just so we're on the same page, when I say third-party scripts, I don't mean JavaScript libraries like Angular or jQuery or any of these kinds. All of these can be hosted locally on your servers, so they're less of a risk factor. I'm talking about services incorporated to your site's your site code, using external JavaScript. JavaScript that you can't host locally and must access remote servers. Services like social media or analytics tool, advanced marketing tools. Any service that a website uses to monetize or to enhance user experience is usually added to the page using external JavaScript. Now, to understand why this poses a problem, we'll go over the flow a user goes through when loading a page. So imagine you're a user and you're logging into your bank. You will go your browser will call to the website server, and the website server will send the HTML code back to your machine. Now, at this point, you've already covered all the security measures we have in place today. You've covered the firewall, the WAF, the SSL, and if you can find any other initials along the way, you've passed those too. Everything now is happening on your browser, completely separated from the website security parameter. But it is at this point that your browser is going to call all other third-party servers to activate their services. These, in turn, can call fourth, fifth, sixth, even 10th party services, completely beyond your control or knowledge. And they, in turn, will send JavaScript back to your page, back to the user, so the services can work. Now, what some people don't realize is that JavaScript, no matter its origin, whether it's owned by the website or a third party, has the same level of access to the page. It can add things to the page, remove. It can redirect you to different pages. It can call additional JavaScript from sources that are unknown to us, access every field, every form on the page, and record every keystroke. In short, they have full control. And because this is all happening on the user's browser, outside of our security perimeter, we have zero transparency over what happens there. We don't know. Now, considering what we know, it's not really a wonder that 85% of exploits on websites are coming through third parties. True, this is not all JavaScript. This can be browser plugins and more. But we can assume JavaScript is a big piece of this. More importantly, most websites will not detect this. And this makes sense if you think of it. If you consider third-party services, the ones we know, they are very user-targeted. So let's take an example. If you go as a user to an e-commerce site, you look at a product. An ad for this product now is going to hunt you for at least a few days. You're going to see it wherever you go. And that's because these services know you. And these services can react differently to different user groups. Because of that, they are very hard to analyze or to control. But most disturbingly, the median number of days it takes to detect such an intrusion is almost 3 months. Now, to me, that's an eternity. Now, you may ask why these numbers are related to the GDPR and privacy at all. Obviously, I'm talking about a security problem here. But if we consider that almost every mouse movement, every keystroke are monitored by third-party services today, services like heat maps, advanced analytic, chat services, lead generations, and that third-party behavior changes from page to page and user to user, meaning we cannot track them, then how do we enforce GDPR compliance on our third-party scripts? And this is even before we consider that these scripts, these servers, they might get hacked, and then hackers might use them to take information out of them. But we don't have to take my word on it. This actually just happened. Pizza Hut were hacked using a third-party script. This was rumored to be their analytics, but they didn't actually tell. Now, sensitive information was taken from users. Enough information to actually allow credit cards to max out, creating a huge GDPR compliance issue. They lost addresses, email addresses, payment methods. Now, luckily for them, if you can consider being hacked lucky at all, is that this happened before GDPR is in effect, and it happened in the US. So there were no additional fines to this hack. And I remind you, GDPR can fine you 20 million euros or 4% of your gross revenue, the higher of the two, if they detect an intrusion. So what does all this have to do with the GDPR anyway? If you've ever tried reading it, you know GDPR is a huge document. It spans almost 90 pages and addresses many, many privacy issues and can be quite a lot to take. Now, when it comes to third-party scripts, there are 3 articles in the GDPR we need to consider. We have Article 16. Simply put, this article says that your users has the right to correct any information you have on them. This naturally is in line with the fact that if your users request it, you must provide to them all the information you have stored on them in a readable manner. Now, this in itself can be quite a hassle and a big challenge. Just accessing the information on your own data center. I mean, I don't need to tell you that as an organization grows, it might use different technologies to store information. Now, trying to pull information from all layers of technologies and storage on one single user and display it in a readable manner for that user can be a very big challenge for a company. Now, Article 17, the right to be forgotten, clearly states by the name, this means that the user can ask you to delete everything you have on him. Goes hand in hand with Article 18, which means the user can ask you to stop storing any information on him. So, if it's hard for an organization to access information on his own data center, what do you do about third parties? How do you make sure that your third parties provide the information the user requested, or that they delete it and stop tracking that user? Which brings us to a big question. Why is it your responsibility anyway, as a website, to cover the actions of your third-party scripts? After all, they're the ones doing it, not you. Now, I've had a chance to have this discussion several times. I've had it with product guys, with R&D, with security. I've had it with websites and with third parties. And I've heard a lot of good arguments to both sides. Starting with, it's the website's responsibility because they use these services and that code comes with the site's code. And ending with whatever happens on the user's browser is the user's responsibility and I'm not going to worry about it. Now, I would consider taking sides here. However, GDPR saves the argument for us. It defines responsibility of communicating the restrictions of Articles 16 to 18 to the recipients, which are third parties, on the controller, which is the site. So the website is responsible to communicate the user's demands and make sure they are upheld. This puts an end to the argument and leaves us with a question. How do we enforce this? I mean, we definitely don't want to run around every time a user posts a request and talk to all of our third parties trying to access the information they have on him. Not to mention, every third party can use multiple fourth parties, and these can use fourth parties. The chain never ends. This is not what we want to do. We want a technical way to isolate private information from third-party scripts. We want to stop the problem before it happens, not try and put out the fire afterwards. So, obviously, this is not a new issue. Third parties have been around ever since there were websites. There are tools available for us to minimize the security and privacy issues of incorporating third parties to our website. And as technology advances, more are becoming available every day. So let's talk about iframes for a minute. Traditionally, they were a very, very good tool to protect from third-party risks. Isolating scripts on the page provided a good protection from both security and privacy issues. However, a lot of these services today can't work inside iframes at all. They need some sort of access to the page so they can do their job. Let's take, for example, content recommendation engines. The widget you have on news sites at the end of the article saying you may also want to read this one or that one. In order for these scripts to do their job, they need to read the article. They need to know what you've read before. So without access to the page, they can't work. So the use of iframe is in constant decrease. Now, HTML5 came with sandbox iframes. This is a more secure tool. It provides more options. For example, we can prevent script execution or prevent form submission. Now, this can be a good tool, but if not handled correctly, And without some intimate knowledge about what our third parties are going to do on the page, it's very hard to do this without actually killing their operations, which will cause both financial issues and performance issues on the website. Now we have HTTP headers. These tools can allow us to control the origin of content on our pages by allowing us to create domains whitelists or to force all content to come from HTTPS sites. This can be a powerful tool also. They can also prevent iframes and even control how cookies are set. One issue is that these are for the entire page. They're not just for third parties. So this could be quite a hassle trying to manage your own website. I mean, imagine blocking iframes on your entire web page. Again, these two might also affect the operation of third-party scripts and prevent you from utilizing their services. And then there's JS libraries. That's an interesting tool. Open source projects like AdSafe or Caja, which is Spanish for box, I think. These will allow you to wrap third parties and enforce your policies on them. It can remove dangerous JavaScript actions and replace them with benign functions. This is what AdSafe does. Or using Caja, you can isolate third parties from the page in a sort of virtual environment, only taking out what you want from it. Now, if you know your third parties, you can set up a fair system here. It will require a lot of R&D maintenance, though. And one more issue is that, depending on the library, you will need to adjust your site's code to work with it. Some require compiling parts of your code on their own servers. Others will require third parties to adjust their code to support their API. So, since we know there are technologies to support privacy and security while working with third parties, why are we still exposed today? If we look at the websites today, we see that the methods I've described above are at low to even no adoption at all. And I believe I understand why that is. We know that these solutions are implemented and managed by R&D teams on our websites. It is up to R&D to set up HTTP headers or set the proper sandbox iframe parameters that will allow proper security, privacy, while keeping third parties operational. Now, if libraries are adjusted, it's up to R&D to recompile the website if needed, or to launch a new site version every time you want to change your policies. This in itself is a huge overhead on a website. Now, if libraries are adopted, Now, R&D are not the team that should be making these decisions. This is a security team's issue. This means that security and R&D needs to be in constant communication between them, which create an even slower process. Security, on their end, would want as few third parties to even know third parties on the web page. If they do have third parties on the web page, they will want to set very strict policies. Now, unless you have a security guy who is intimately familiar with every third party there is out there and knows exactly what they need to operate, this will take a lot of try and try again until these will actually work with the policies they're trying to set. So the process keeps on getting slower and slower and more complicated. And then we have marketing. They need to scale as fast as possible. They need to add to our dollars and run as many projects in parallel as possible. So not surprising, all these processes that keeps taking more and more time are creating very much frustration for marketing guys. Our teams are actually in constant frictions all the time. Security will always say no as much as they can, while R&D will keep telling you that they don't have the time to allocate to new projects. Projects are starting weeks and even months after initial engagement. But at the end of the day, marketing will almost always win in an argument against security. Because at the end of the day, this is all about the dollars. And we can see that websites that had 0 third parties 10 years ago will have dozens today, despite the obvious need for security and for privacy. Now, more and more websites today actually provide marketing teams with tag management platforms, allowing them direct access to the page. They can put whatever script they want to whatever page they want to, forfeiting the basically last inch of control we have. An easy way to solve this would be to remove third parties from the page completely. But I doubt that will ever happen. If we want to stay competitive, we need services that we cannot develop in-house. We need to monetize, we need to track, we need heat maps to adjust our websites. E-commerce sites need platforms that will recommend the next product you want to buy. All these cannot be developed in-house. So since we don't want to remove third-party script from our pages, or can't, we need to find a solution for this problem, now with the GDPR coming more than ever. And if current solutions are not or cannot be adopted, we must find a way to adjust them to meet our needs. In our minds, having a policy-based solution was always a good way to go at it. But these needs to be adjusted to fit the shareholders in the organization facing these issues. Today they are focused on the technical problem itself of controlling and managing third parties, not taking into account the inner processes of the organization that should implement these services. We must remember, even when we're creating an open source solution, integration, maintenance, and management costs a lot of money to anyone using our solution. And if the overhead is too big, there's going to be no adoption. We need to consider that integration must be easy, fast, and maintaining should take no R&D resources or very low. We should not expect third parties to adjust their codes to work with our solution. We should be transparent to third parties. Otherwise, we're not going to support all of them. We need to allow security teams to change policies without adding to R&D workloads and without delaying the needs of marketing teams. Solving this issue should be something that removes friction, not something that creates more friction. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes.
Sorry. Hi.
Hi.
A lot of huge companies just buy software from big software vendors like SAP or Backbase. And how is it then? Is the company responsible for checking the code for third-party JS libraries?
Okay, so that's a good question. When you buy a service, any service provider, then yes, most of the websites today will do some sort of code review on these codes before they implement it to the website. But if you remember the slide of the flow, then this code is just a reference to a remote server. And that remote server will send code back to our browser, to our services. So this code can change 10 seconds after you've checked it and launched your website, and you will never know about it. Even if not changed, this code can react differently to you and to other users based on your user parameters, your geography, your browser history, or any other parameter they choose to use. And we've seen multiple examples of it, even in privacy. And there was a good example, I think, at the end of last year, where someone used an ad network to send malware only to users coming from the German parliament. That is a very, very small user group. They targeted the header, and only these were affected. all in all, just 10 people were affected. So how can you scan for that?
Hi.
Hi.
When you say Article 17, right to be forgotten, so when user opted for the deletion of a user account or some other information, example, deletion of his entire user account, do we need to delete entire user account, or can we keep some kind of information like email address at least? Few of information.
I think your internal process aside, the GDPR defines information. What the GDPR refers to is any information that can identify a user. So email address, phone number, name, address, all of these must be forgotten. Now, the articles are quite vague, and you can try and interpret it differently, but I'm pretty sure they mean you need to delete everything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your talk. I enjoyed it. It's nice to see a link between the regulatory compliance part and the technical part. You don't see that often in the Black Hat. Besides the issues that you named, I see a more urgent issue, and that is finding a legal ground that fits your processing. So you have, I think, 5 or 6 different ones, but there are very few that actually match this purpose. It's either a legitimate interest of the company or the consent of the user. And since legitimate interest is quite vague, that only leaves consent, which is very hard to get right. Especially since users often don't get the choice to activate that script or not. Because that causes a friction with the interest of the company. If you're doing analytics, you don't want to depend on consent of the user to count how many users you got, which pages they visited. So I don't know what your feeling is about that.
Well, obviously, it's in the best interest of the website to have as much information as possible. And they obviously are not going to consult users about what type of services they will use. But the GDPR defines, again, very, very simple bits of information that for that you need consent. And that is anything that will allow you to identify the user, whether it is their IP address or their name, their address, phone number again. If you just count the fact that they were in the website, or if you say that generally between 2 million users, 90% of them likes to click this button and most of them don't click that button using heat maps, then GDPR does not cover that. This is your prerogative as a website, and you need that so you can improve your services. But once you say that the users that are doing this comes from this specific IP address, or this is done by this registered users, which you know all this about, then it becomes a problem, and then GDPR takes into effect.
Sven, can you hear me? All right, so thank you for a great talk. It was a great summary of the current landscape.
Thank you.
My question is about the solution. So are you aware of any technical talks in the industry like W3C, about enforcing these policies in the browser? Something like CSP level 500 or something like that? So
we have the solutions I've covered so far, which are still inadequate, but they're a good start. I know there are companies that scans your website to tell you if any infractions happened, so you can be alerted and try to react to it. There are more technologies out there, and some of them I don't think I should talk about from this stage. You can address me later. Thank you. Okay, thank you.